Hello, music makers. Welcome back. Last week, we looked at samples, mostly from the perspective of a DJ who might just be starting out making their own stuff. A very broad overview of the basic musical fundamentals. This week, however, is going to be the complete opposite. I want to show you the other end of the spectrum. What you can do with samples when you've got your 10,000 hours in. I was working on a UK garage track after last month's live stream, and I found some really sick samples, but they needed a fair amount of swapping and chopping to get them where I needed them. So I thought I'd hit record and show you how I did it. Let's go. Okay, let me show you the general vibe of the track in question. Banger! Well, I think so anyway. I think all the essential ingredients are in there. I know many of you are still waiting on the garage video I've promised you, but to be honest, every time I approach any part of it, the rabbit hole just gets even deeper. I like to teach on first principles, less about how and more about why. And just taking the drums, for example, I don't think I could talk about garage drums without talking about the origins, the Paradise Garage, breaks, rave and jungle, two-step versus house, all that good stuff. I mean, just look at my last attempt. It took me 20 minutes to explain a single garage chord principle. So, the only way we're going to get this done is to tackle each thing in its own video. And as we did samples last week, we're going to focus on the samples in this video. Let's dive in. So, this whole thing came out of last month's live stream. If you didn't know, I always stream live on the last Sunday of the month, 6 PM GMT. The idea was to make a garage track, but I'm still not up to speed on the modern UK garage scene. So I got the chat to recommend some references, and they suggested Sammy Virji's All Right and his collab with Salute, Peach. Sammy's All Right sounding pretty classic. For me, it's somewhere halfway between the musical approach of MJ Cole and speed garage, but not the aggressive bassline stuff. As far as I can tell, all the musical parts are played as opposed to sampled, whereas the collab with Salute has a lot more sampling going on, and some really cool musical manipulations that I was inspired by. What I really wanted to do was combine the two. I always try to have at least two references, so I can get more of an overview for the sound and hopefully not get too close to any one track in particular. Now, we didn't end up finishing a track on that live stream, mostly because by the time we were done analysing it and discussing it, I knew finding great samples was going to take quite a while, especially as I wanted ones which would be very musically flexible. I'll explain what I mean by that shortly. Anyways, in the meantime, I found some great ones. Let me show you what I found and what I've done to them. So, our samples in question are... and this one too. So my first guiding principle here is just aesthetics. Regardless of chords, etc., the first thing we need is the right vibe. I tend to gravitate towards samples that sound, sampled. By that I mean I couldn't just recreate them with a piano or a synth. These sound like they could be taken from a 70s TV or movie. Multiple instruments in there, not necessarily perfectly in tune, sounds like recorded to tape, lots of noise, just good vibes, basically. Now, the second thing I'm listening out for is the harmonic content. This is where the ear training comes in. In my garage chord video, I talked about how Sammy used the 6-5-1 chord progression in a few tracks. Actually, his harmony is a lot more varied than that, but in the few commonalities I found across his tracks, 6-5-1 was in there, and I'm going to use that as a simple starting point to emulate his vibe. So ideally, I'm listening for a sample which already has that progression in it, or has chords that I can manipulate into that progression. Now, I didn't start the track based on the musical samples. The first sample I found was the vocal. I've got this one here, it's in B minor. Now, as I said earlier, why this makes a good garage vocal is its own video, so we'll get to that later. But the easiest test is just to listen in context. Here's a simple 6-5-1 on piano in B minor. And if we throw this over a garage drum loop, it sounds like this. So that works. Now, how do we get it all to fit? Well, as I alluded to earlier, I'm listening for both aesthetics and the harmonic content. And the reason I chose this sample, even though this is labeled D major, you can see underneath here I've already worked out the chords. This sample is actually using a 4, 5, 1 in B minor. There is a D major over here, but I would class this as a passing chord. It doesn't sound like the home key. Now, 4-5-1 is very similar to a 6-5-1, especially in terms of functional harmony. If you want to know more about that, see my garage chord video again. But if we want a 6-5-1, it poses a slight problem. I can't pitch a 4-5-1 into a 6-5-1. You see, what I'm actually listening for in a sample, once I've found the vibe, is hopefully both major and minor chords inside it. This is what I was referring to earlier when I said I wanted samples that were musically flexible. Let me explain that further. Now, I showed this in my Truth Behind Chord Sampling video, but if you didn't know, not all of those 7 chords in a key are the same type. So, for example, in a minor key, not all 7 chords are minor chords. It's weird, but it's true. If you want the specifics, again, go see that video. But the point is, if we want to make any chord progression out of any sample, we're going to need to be able to extract both major and minor chords out of that sample. Now, in our case, we're looking for a 6-5-1, but not any 6-5-1. In the garage chord video, I discussed the scale of harmonic minor, not just natural minor. And chords 6 and 5 in harmonic minor are major chords. Now, the problem comes from the fact that most samples you'll be finding, if they're in minor, they will be in the natural minor scale. And 4-5-1 is a very common progression, but 4-5-1 in a natural minor scale is made up of entirely minor chords. Chords 4, 5, and 1 in a natural minor scale are all minor chords. So if I want these garage vibes of 6-5-1 in harmonic minor, I'm going to want some major chords in the sample. So even if they're not actually chord 6 or 5, I can pitch a major chord to that. Let me show you what I'm trying to describe with actual sound. Here's that garage vibe 6-5-1 in harmonic minor, the one we actually want. Okay, and here's a 4-5-1 in natural minor. So kind of similar, but not the same. Now, if I just try to pitch this chord 4 up to chord 6, it's going to sound weird because it's a minor chord, and we need a major chord on chord 6. That sounds like this. It's a much darker vibe. This is what we want. This is what it would be. As I explained in that chord sampling video, this is why rave has those vibes, because you're pitching around chords that aren't in scale. Let me show you what happens when we try that with the sample I've chosen. Now, this gets even more complicated because, as you can see from the chords I worked out inside the sample, they're not just 3-note triads, there's extensions on here. The chord 4 in this sample has a 9th extension, and when we pitch this, even stranger things happen. That's going to sound like this now. So it's kind of wonky, kind of cool, kind of strange, but it's not that Sammy Virji vibe I'm going for. Now, it gets even more interesting because one of the other reasons I chose this sample is because I thought I heard a major chord 5. I thought this sample was in harmonic minor, which would solve my problem. However, upon closer inspection, this chord 5 has a very strange extension. It's called a sharp 9. This one. Now, a sharp 9 chord does have a major chord underneath, but also the minor on top. This chord in some circles is known as the Hendrix chord. Jimi Hendrix used this a lot. Very cool, but the problem for us is, although this is a great fruity major chord on chord 5, if we try to use it as a chord 6, it pulls us out of scale again and gives us strange vibes. Like this. It's better than trying to use that chord 4 and the minor extensions as a chord 6, but still not quite the vibe I'm after. I told you, finding good samples was going to be a mission. Luckily for us, there is a happy ending. Almost literally. The chord at the end, the D major, the one the sample is mislabeled after, this one. It turns out chord 3, including all of its extensions, if you pitch that up to chord 6, that's +5. This entire major chord, including its extensions, happens to fit perfectly in scale. So let's pitch the sample. Sounds like this. At last, we have 6-5-1 in harmonic minor, all whilst keeping the aesthetic of that cool sample. Garage vibes. Whew, we got there in the end. Okay, so putting this all together, I've sped the sample up to double time because our chord progression needs to move faster. That's still the original 4-5-1 progression. So if we do our pitching tricks and take our chord 3 up to chord 6, +5, just need 2 beats of that, and then we take some of chord 5, take chord 1, couple of those, we end up with this. Good stuff. 6-5-1-1 in harmonic minor at the tempo we need. And then I thought, why not keep that original chord 4 as an option? So I've ended up with a 6-5-1-1 and a 4-5-1-1 answer. I like the way that the melody connects in there. Gives me extra options for the final arrangement. Now the second sample, let's come back to that one. This was in G sharp minor. So I've pitched that up 3 to get that into B minor and also doubled the speed. There are some faint chords in there, but it's negligible. I'm going to remove the bottom off it anyway. The role of this part is to provide that top hook melody. Together, sounding like this. It also works because any timbre changes from pitching the other sample around too far are masked by the fact that this sample stays consistent. Then on to bass. Again, we'll do bass in its own video, but here's the line I came up with for a 6-5-1, 4-5-1. And we have drums. Again, we'll get to that in its own video, but altogether, sounding like... This is why I love my job. This role I've found myself in, this kind of musical conduit into the dance world, because we get to keep the best of both worlds. the sample DJ mashup culture at the heart and origin of dance music, and the musicianship that helps us pull that off even more effectively and without the frustration and guesswork too. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching me enjoy solving my nerdy little sample problem there. If you did, you know what to do. Also, a reminder, if you didn't see last week's video, you'll notice the Buy Me a Coffee link has been replaced with a GoFundMe link. That's a GoFundMe I've started to help a singer friend of mine get urgent medical help. Details on the GoFundMe page, but if you were thinking of donating to me, please may I ask you to consider donating to the GoFundMe instead. Or if you can, just spread the word. We're 2/3 of the way there, we just need a final push. Thank you very much for your attention and generosity. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.